strength are you with me feeling?
Ladies and gentlemen, it's Adrian's Dunchik CMT Charter Market Ignition. Welcome back to the 6th edition of our Trading Congress. The Trading Congress is back closer to Hanukkah than ever before, actually close to all-time highs. And well, there's not too many people, I think, that can speak about the Bitcoin super cycle, right? Not many people understand it. Not many people comprehend what it truly means. Not to even mention all those people that are not joined in this industry yet. They are waiting on the sidelines before actually Bitcoin breaks 100K. There's a lot of, I'd say, bears outstanding still, the last bear standing, that say that 100K is the invalidation of their bearishness, even we are way past all-time highs. So there's a lot of still misinformation, a lot of still disbelief in the market, even though we are literally closer to 100K than ever before. And that sparks up a lot of questions, like, is really super cycle possible? Like, what is a super cycle? Are we in a super cycle? How far is it gonna go? And so many of the other questions. And I'm gonna be joined by our today's guest right in a second to talk about this, who is a godfather of cryptocurrencies, of crypto markets. We're gonna be joined by the man, the legend himself. However, before we do so, this is a kind reminder that we are celebrating the Black Friday, just like any other company in the world, just like any other shop. And this is a kind reminder, basically, that for any time that you can scan this QR code right now, as long as you see it in the screen, you are actually going to be able to claim 24/7 trading help and stop losing money, basically, in the markets that are not really good for you. And you're going to be able to get all the accredited, reliable, profitable trading guidance in the community trusted by thousands since 2017. And I actually mean it, that we are actually accredited to do what we are doing for many years. There's a CMT charter behind all of that. So all you have to do is just scan the QR code and grab this 50% off limited discount. And without further ado, I want to bring on our today's guest, the man, the legend himself, Michael Terpin, who's been called by the CNBC as the crypto godfather, who's a first crypto investor in Puerto Rico, who's a fellow Bored Ape holder, which is even better. He's a Bitcoin preferentialist, who's actually studying on the BitAngels and the tokenized stuff, author of Bitcoin Supercycle. And I'm extremely excited for what Michael has to say today. How's it going? How are you feeling today, brother?
Thanks, Verb. I'm great. I'm sitting here in Puerto Rico. That's the actual background in the back. Well, a picture of it, but enjoying the 85-degree weather and the almost $100,000 Bitcoin, about 97 and change right now.
Oh man, the man behind the super cycle, for everybody, that's let's start with the definitions then. I mean, how it all started for you, the story, how it all started. How did you come up with the super cycle, what it means to you, how the story has shaped, basically, and put it all together in your case?
Sure. So I've been in Bitcoin since early 2013 when it was $100. Saw it crash down to 66. Spoke in front of a group in New York, the New York Angels, traditional investors, the same week I was speaking at a very early Bitcoin conference, Inside Bitcoins, if you remember that one. And I was excited to talk to traditional investors about the opportunities in Bitcoin. And I explained why I was going to change the world. I explained why it was a great deal at $66. 100 people in the audience. They're listening to all sorts of startup pitches. I followed a woman with a bicycle helmet on who was doing some kind of social bicycle, exercise app. She got millions of dollars. I didn't get a single person to buy Bitcoin. In fact, I had one person come up to me afterwards and tell me that I was going to be arrested if I kept on talking about Bitcoin because it was only good for drugs and prostitution. And
Wow.
2013, at the end of the decade, the New York Angels had a vote about what their biggest missed opportunity of the decade was, and Bitcoin came in second to them, passing on Pinterest at $1.5 million market cap.
Yeah, that is, well, in the history of the mishouts, that one stings like an MF properly, right? That one stings for everybody who missed out, who was present in the chance from the legend that Michael Terpin is, everybody. And I think many of the questions that are going to line up, as in, super cycle. This is so much often, I should say, overused at times in one cases and underused in other cases, because there seems to be different definitions of that. So let's set it once
So
and for
I
all.
use
What is a
super.
super cycle?
So Yes, I use Supercycle. There's two real meanings of Supercycle. It really started being used in the 1930s by Elliot, who came up with the Elliott wave. He talked about a grand supercycle lasting centuries, and then a supercycle that lasts at least 5 years, and then cycles going all the way down to microcycles that can be days or even hours. And that was sort of the foundation of what's been known as the Elliott wave, and a lot of the things that came up in the 1930s following the stock market crash explained a lot of things, and have been, had a fairly good track record. Now, the first person to use the word Bitcoin supercycle was actually in, I think it was 20, it's in the book, I think it was like 2018, when someone had talked about a Bitcoin and Litecoin supercycle. Litecoin, remember that one? And then Dan Held projected that there was going to be a supercycle during COVID that would take us to $800,000. Obviously, a little premature on that one. Dan's a good friend, and I told him I was writing the book and using the name, and he's like, I don't remember who actually came up with the name first. It was probably the person who said the Bitcoin and Litecoin supercycle. But supercycle has had meetings in the commodities market as well as in technology, and I'm taking the two of them together. Number one, there have been three commodity supercycles. There was one when gold quadrupled its price in the 70s. A supercycle has to have an impetus, right? And it then had another commodity supercycle in the 90s when China started just building everything they needed: copper, they needed all these materials. And now we're starting a third supercycle with gold and silver and other precious commodities going up because of money printing. And so, to me, a supercycle in Bitcoin means that we reverse the diminishing returns we've had since the beginning. The first cycle, prior to the halving, bottom to top was 3,000x, a tenth of a penny to $30, and then it crashed 97%. The second cycle, which started with the first halving, was 100x and then 85%. The second halving was 30x and then 83%. So you've got a trend there, right? It was like 3,000x, then 100x, then 30x. I projected it was going to be 10x the last time, ended up being 9x, still pretty close. And I think macro being bad with all the interest rate hikes, dampened that. Well, this time we should be about 3x the halving, given that basic math. And I think we'll do better than that because of two things. Number one, obviously Trump getting in, having the first, kind of Bitcoin president is going to help a lot. But just 3x the halving price would still take us to about 193,000. I think we'll beat 200,000 and probably be on the cusp of 300,000. And if we go any higher than that, we'll be completely dependent on how the rest of the world reacts. In other words, if Trump comes in and actually does buy Bitcoin for a strategic reserve, will the rest of the world follow suit? Will other nations start putting it into their sovereign wealth funds? That could bring us up to 400,000. I don't think we'll hit a million this cycle, but that would still be the start of a multi-cycle super cycle. The second definition is technology. Every technology that takes off has a period of like years where it takes to go from like the early crazy people, and Jeffrey Moore called that in Crossing the Chasm the early adopters. They want completely different things than the early majority. The early adopters in crypto was like no regulation, freedom. And the early majority is like, no, I want clear regulation. I want to make sure I'm not going to go to jail. I want to make sure my bank account won't be shut down. We're just crossing that chasm now. And in most technologies, it happen in mobile phones, happen in the internet, happen in computers. When you reach about 7 or 8% of the population, you quickly go in a decade to like 80%. And there's only so much Bitcoin left. That's going to cause the super cycle.
My man, and you know what, it's giving me goosebumps already. I mean, that's pretty solid for what you mentioned. It's hard to debate that. What I'm thinking in terms of like skewing the odds in our favor for what you mentioned is the fact that the retails are not even here in terms of like anywhere 50, 60%, of what it was 3 years ago, right? So by the simple
Right.
stuff of the Google's trend search, is last time I checked, it was literally 58%, I think. Which means that not even 6 people out of 10 of who actually was placing interest in Bitcoin in 2021 is doing that right now, which means that still 40% or so, are not even paying attention yet. Probably they're waiting for, to be pulled in by this trigger of 100K and so on. That's where it catches in, on Spark and a lot of headlines, it makes it to the mainstream, right? At the same time, we have the BlackRock, we have the funds, we have the ETFs, we have hundreds of billions of dollars, close to 600 billions of the total spot ETF cumulative volume turnover, right? We're talking about the AUM and the tens of billions of dollars, basically presented by the BlackRock, by Fidelity, right, by ARK Invest, and so many other funds that can legally right now acquire the market share, right, and just present, somehow mark themselves. This opens up a whole new horizon basically for all those institutional traders. That's one thing. And also for the retail traders who just want to hold a stake in crypto, but they fear of custody, they fear of the risks of losing money, right? So there's so much of the upside coming from just pure mathematics, just like you referred to it, right? But also there's this entire long tail that seems that might be happening, right? This right tail of this financial distribution, as we often check on the charts, that is likely going to push us way higher than we expect. So I don't know if it's going to be 1 million, but it seems that it's going to be better than anyone kind of like projects. I'm more than happy to see it more over 200K. When is it going to happen to your likes?
So I talk in the book about the four seasons of Bitcoin, and that was originally what I was going to call the book, but my publisher liked Bitcoin Supercycle, and so there was elements of that. I thought I'd go with that. But the thing that I want traditional investors to understand, and this is the reason why most of them didn't get into crypto in 2013 and 2015 and 2017, they would ask me questions, and go and ask their broker, and that's all. They got the ETFs. But what most investors, real estate investors, technology investors, etc., do not understand that there are cycles in Bitcoin that are as easily identifiable and trackable as the cycles in the stock market. Most stock market investors, at least the smart ones, know about sell in May and go away, and you can get a better portfolio if you are out of the market in the summer. I did that and survived having to deal with the 2008 crash. I was all in cash at that point. You've got real estate cycles that people understand, but they don't realize that. They just think, oh, well, Bitcoin, the moment I buy, it's going to drop 80%. They don't think there's any cycles. And there are clear cycles. There are 4-year cycles. They're based on the halving and the fear and greed that happens after that. I define 4 clear cycles. I call them the 4 seasons of Bitcoin. Bitcoin spring happens the day of the halving. That's easy to predict. You can see it in advance when it's going to be. Next one's roughly going to be between February and April of 2028. This last one happened April 20th of this year. And what has happened every time after the halving is you go flat for 4 to 7 months. And the reason is you have 2 counteracting forces. You have the force of greed, knowing that it's going to be higher this season, this cycle, because it's always been. And then you also have the selling pressure that the miners go from being 20% profitable on average to 35% unprofitable. They turn off their machines. They have to sell Bitcoin to go and afford better machines and maybe move to a friendlier jurisdiction with lower taxes or with better electricity costs. And so that sort of like keeps Bitcoin flat. I mean, it was so flat this time that the halving price is 63,900. You had the exact price 6 months later, 63,900. And eventually what happens is that you end up having more new users buying and sort of seeing that it hasn't gone to zero after the halving. And you inevitably reach the all-time high of the last cycle. One controversy was there was a number of pundits that said, oh, well, because we reached 73,850 in March, a month before the halving, that means it's going to be a shorter cycle. What I say is you can't have this cycle's high before the halving. That's last cycle. And so I was proven right because Bitcoin summer starts not a year after the spring. It happens 4 to 7 months after the day that you pass the all-time high of the prior cycle. It happened in 2013 when you passed $30. It rocketed right up to 250 within a few weeks and then ended the year at 1,250-ish. It happened 4 years later when the 2016 halving, you pass the $1,200, 19,008. 4 years later, when you end up having the halving at around 8,700 in 2020, you ended up having The price was passed in December of that year, and then it rocketed right up from 19.8 to over 60,000 in 4 months. And so that happens every single cycle. And sure enough, this time I projected that we would have the new price no later than November, or if Kamala won, maybe December. But if Trump runs, surely early November, and that would be passing 73,850 and would rocket up. And I feel like my crystal ball was pretty accurate on this one, because that's exactly what happened that I predicted in the book, and that's why we're now on the cusp of 100,000.
So if we are not even fully loaded in the summer yet, how much excited can we get about that, right? Because all those
Well, the
targets
thing,
seem to be materializing. You know what I mean?
well, those targets will happen in the next year, because Bitcoin summers never lasted more than 12 months. It's been historically between 9 and 11 months, and interestingly enough, every bubble pop has been in the fourth quarter of the year after the halving. So the all-time high of the first halving was on December 4th, the year after the halving. Then the second one was December 17th, the year after the halving. The third one was November 10th, the year after the halving. It's only a 37-day window within 1,384 days of a typical 4-year cycle. So that's a very small window that you can basically say, this is what I should be selling. This book is not just for amateur investors in crypto who are investors in other assets, but also for the hodlers who say, well, I'm never going to sell. I'm just going to, hand it off to my grandchildren to give to their grandchildren. It's worked out for them so far. If they bought 1,000 Bitcoin at the end of 2012 for $12,000, it's now worth 97 million. That's great. But if they had followed the advice of the book and sold near the top, you're never going to pick the exact top. It sold at 1,000 instead of 1,250, and then bought back at 250 instead of 177. They would have about $6 billion today on a $12,000
Wow.
investment.
Yeah, those are decent numbers. Those are decent numbers. So, are you actually loading off the money off the table basically before the winter comes? So before the autumn comes, before the market peaks, we say within this 37 day
That's my
window, or you're
suggestion,
actually
is
holding
whatever.
through it?
No, I suggest to sell. You can DCA into selling in case there's an extra push that is unexpected. But once you get into that window time, uh, you don't regret selling something at 60,000 when you use that cash to buy it back at 20, right? And so I'd say most people who are not just like set it and forget it and really don't care, um, real reliable cycle, half, all, whatever you're comfortable with, and buy it back. Just make sure that you hold on to the cash and don't buy it back too soon. You have to wait for capitulation. And capitulation is typically about 1 year after the top. And this last cycle was exactly 1 year to the day. November 10th of 2021 was the top. November 10th of 2022 was the bottom. 4 years early, it was within 3 days. December 17th was the top. December 14th was the bottom. So it's again been pretty predictable to date, and I don't think it's going to vary dramatically this cycle.
So by that means, when would you expect, like if you were to give a little bit of an expectation, translating in layman terms for everybody who's watching and viewing right now, when would you expect the peak? When is the top?
I would say the top is going to be fourth quarter of the year after the halving again. It could be a little earlier, in maybe as early as October, but I think we're going to have a double bubble again. So I think you can get a pretty good initial top in April or May, like you did 4 years ago, and you might want to take a little off the top and buy some in the summer back. And then sell most of what you want to sell at the final top, which is going to be in the fall. There's certainly a possibility of a shorter cycle this time, but it would be new. It would be something that never happened before.
I got you. And you're often in the book, and it works in the way you speak, and how you speak. You very often debunk a couple of big myths, that people have about Bitcoin, especially the ones that are prejudiced, that they have prejudgment before the media talking heads told them that it's a scam, just like you mentioned before, because people told them, oh, they lost, $5, and it's just a bad deal, right? And it's not worth it. And then, if it dumps, then they are like, oh yeah, I told you so. So, what are the other myths that are most frequently kind of like presented to you when you speak in front of the people?
Well, certainly the myth is that it's as gold, and I would say that Bitcoin has more utility than gold. I mean, gold you can make jewelry great, and it's got a value that's universally recognized. So does Bitcoin now. Every nation in the world has an exchange. You can turn it into the local fiat currency. But you can't take gold and transport it across nations in seconds, which you can in Bitcoin. That would be the number one myth. In terms of people, buying a lot high and selling low, the media like to perpetuate that story. Oh, here's a person who spent $1 million on Bitcoin at 60,000 and they just lost 75% of their money. Well, you only lose it if you sell it at the bottom. And stock market is the same way. A lot of novice investors will go and, buy Facebook at the high and then panic sell it at the low. And that's just, that's amateur behavior. You don't want to buy anything at the high, and you want to buy it, as Rothschild said, buy when there's blood in the streets, even if it's your own blood.
Oh yeah, that's a true OG speaking for you, right? Because that's what I often kept telling to myself when I held all the shitcoins when and I saw them basically nuke down to 99%. You only lose when you sell. Right? I mean, some of them are still dead, but for the Bitcoin sake, it's actually far opposite. And one of the next questions that goes to Michael Terpin for everybody who's watching and viewing right now as we speak is basically the ETFs aspect, right? Um, because I kind of like brought the aspect of the ETFs, of course, this institutional interest on one hand, uh, and institutional kind of like an interest on one hand, but also how the ETFs are going to impact, how are the ETFs going to impact basically potentially the market peak. Is it going to be created literally by the ETFs taking off profits? So in the meantime of waiting for Michael to reconnect real quick, this is a kind reminder for everybody to actually scan the
I
QR
think I'm
code that
back
we
here.
have.
I think I'm back. I'm
Yeah,
on. I'm on. Puerto Rico Wi-Fi is not perfect,
that's
so
all right. That's all
sorry
right.
about that. But I
That's
did
all
I
right.
did hear the question about how the ETFs are going to impact crypto going forward. I'd say it's in two ways: one positive, one negative. The positive part is it's now bringing in people who have a Charles Schwab account and hear about Bitcoin, and they don't know how to hold it. They don't want to go and deal with extra KYC to get a Coinbase account, and they're like, "Oh, I can actually hold Bitcoin in an ETF." Now, they don't truly hold Bitcoin. They hold an IOU for Bitcoin. And if there was a massive financial meltdown, they may find that their IOU from BlackRock is actually owned by BlackRock. But there are other strategies investing in Bitcoin without holding Bitcoin. In fact, it's actually outperformed Bitcoin because they've been leveraging Bitcoin. And so I think that'll continue to do well to the top of the cycle. We'll see how it does once the bubble pops. I would say probably just as I recommend people selling their Bitcoin at the top to buy back later, I would suggest the same probably with their MicroStrategy and Coinbase stocks. Just hold the money and buy back later. But that's the good part is that a lot of sort of 40 to 85-year-old folks that aren't as open to having their own wallet, even having a Coinbase account. They already have a stock Bitcoin, if not more so, when leveraged. The bad part is that there has been sort of lawsuits over the years, excuse me, and regulatory actions about games being played with the silver and gold ETFs in the past in terms of having misuse of futures markets, et cetera. You have to kind of Google to see all the ones and where they were resolved, but there has been potential for manipulation, and in the Bitcoin space, Caitlin Long has talked about the possibilities of paper Bitcoin being out there where, the TradFi ETFs are going and, sort of doing a lot of games with futures so that they've got a lot more, kind of rights to Bitcoin than Bitcoin exists in the world, and being able to sort of suppress or inflate Bitcoin on the schedule that they wish. That's something that is a short-term risk, but it's not a long-term risk. Long-term, if there's a lot more demand for Bitcoin, they have to settle in Bitcoin at some point. And so I'd say that you will have. I mean, I say in the book that the things that are going to drive the $1 million Bitcoin in the next 10 years to 20 years, but I think probably closer to 10, is going to be a few things. Number one, it's going to be the desire of people in the global north to have Bitcoin as part of their portfolio, and the global south to have Bitcoin as a hedge against their, exploding currencies. So in Nigeria, in Turkey right now is like it's 60 something percent inflation per year percent. And so you already have a lot of just ordinary people, fleeing to Bitcoin, and then, they'll go and exchange the Bitcoin for Tether once they need to buy products, but they're storing their wealth in Bitcoin, and that will continue. And then again, for the global north, of which I think there's 600 million people who are considered to be in the wealthy nations, or no more than that, I think 1.6 billion. It's in the book, but it's a lot of people. And they can't all own one Bitcoin as much as they'd like to. They can't even own 1/10 of a Bitcoin, because there's only 21 Bitcoin will ever exist, and there's only a little bit over a million that are yet to be mined, and that'll take the next 100 years.
Well, I got you. I mean, we are I think mixed in the part of the problem, because we are holding probably too many as opposed to what many would love to hold, just like you mentioned rightly. So, zero point 0.1 Bitcoin. There's an entire on-chain indicator basically analyzing how much of the zero point 0.1 Bitcoin holders there are in the world, and it's improving, of course, ever since 2022 bottom. Although it's not as fast as many people would appreciate to have. And you mentioned a very important point, Michael, right, about the regulatory aspects. And for the case of European Union, for instance, there is the MiCA regulations, markets and crypto assets, and it's being unfolded with the end of the year in terms of bringing those standardized approach on the European Union kind of like a level degree of the regulations for a lot of businesses to interact with crypto Web3 businesses. Yeah, and while with Michael, we are on the regulatory side. The question actually that Michael that I've got for you is: are the regulators going to help this industry, or they're going to break it?
I think in the US for the next 4 years, they're going to help it. And we'll see if Europe follows along or fights us, right? Um, the European Central Bank is still very negative, even though MiCA is, been helpful to certain projects having clarity. It's still, still pretty banking friendly. And it still has some things that are not as friendly as, say, VARA and some other jurisdictional regulations, which is, I think the US, if they can go and become what Trump is hoping for, the friendliest jurisdiction, then, people will come back to the US, because a lot of the projects, the top 100 projects started in the US. And perhaps I would love to see it where Europeans, instead of going to Dubai, move to New York City, right? That'd be very cool. And that would be sort of a triumph for the US regulatory regime under a pro crypto presidency. But I think that in terms of just the price of Bitcoin, in terms of that versus the proliferance of altcoins, that Trump has said that he wants to have all as many Bitcoin as possible mined in the U.S. So he's going to be very pro, kind of rules that will allow for mining. I mean, as opposed to some of the states like New York that have been shutting down miners because they said it's hurting the environment, with no proof whatsoever to justify that. And so that's kind of I think that for the most part the U.S. side of the regulations will be positive. Uh, Most of the rest of the world will follow the U.S. Europe, we'll have to see, what voices come out of Brussels, because there's still been. I mean, just today I saw something where Sweden is still apparently very anti-Bitcoin in many cases, and there's an editorial that was talking about, please, let's keep Bitcoin out of the financial system. It's not backed by the government. Well, that's the point.
Wow. Well, that's crazy. That's crazy to hear on how much prejudice they can be, how much ignorance there can be about the numbers, right, and about the actual impact and the growth on the institutional state level, just like you mentioned already. So, and what I'm thinking in terms of if we put it on a scale from 1990 to 2000 of a dot-com bubble, where are we with Bitcoin right now?
Um, wow. I think that the dot-com bubble can't be a super cycle because that was a shorter number of years. So I think that we already had our dot-com bubble, and I think that was 2017, because that was 100x and then an 87% crash. I think that this last cycle was more akin, probably a little bit more like now the mid 20 teens when you had the unicorn bubble, right? All the VCs, the institutions were throwing money at unicorns and they had like, multi-billion dollar valuations with no profit. And so I think that you have institutions coming in now. And so I think that the bubble will be a little bit more tame. I think it'll be, but at larger numbers, just like the unicorn bubble that, when it popped, it only got rid of the sort of truly overvalued with not a lot of, fundamental. And so what happens in most 4-year cycles is, I like to say, and I say in the book, when Bitcoin gets a cold, altcoins get pneumonia, and a lot of them die. And so that happens every cycle. The altcoins at the end of the cycle, that's where you're going to get 100x's on some of the high flyers, but that's also where you're going to get them by and large. If Bitcoin goes down even 60%, you're going to have most altcoins go down 90%. And that's true every cycle. I think it'll still be true this cycle. I do believe that we're still going to have a big crash this cycle. You're not going to go from we've had linear diminishing returns 100x 30x 9x will probably be around maybe 3 to 4x this time. You're not going to, and then you've had arithmetic lowering of losses 85%, 83%. I think we were 75% last time. You're not going to go to 20% overnight, right? You're still going to have over 50% loss from the top. I'm projecting probably about 2/3. So if we end up getting to 300,000, we'll crash in a year to 100,000. If we got to 200,000, you'd crash to like 70 something. And so that's, I think, just baked in, which is the reason why you want to take some of your gains off the table and hold it in cash, or maybe hold it in USDC and get some income off of it, and then just be sure to wait for capitulation. Don't buy back too soon. I've been guilty of buying back too soon because it's like, oh, I can get back into Bitcoin at 30% off. Nope, it went down another 50%. And so you have to
Yeah,
really wait for the blood in the street. It's been every single time.
that's true. Every single time we see an altcoin on some, falling off a cliff, basically 90% or so, and we say, hey, this one is cheap. We often see another 90% down from that level that we actually buy, right? That's the spiral effect that we often cannot really uh, push back away from us, even if we want it. Although before we,
And the thing about
because we end up,
the thing about crypto, I'm sorry, the thing about crypto winters is the one season I didn't talk about yet. It's the longest season. So crypto winter starts at capitulation, right? So 4 to 7 months is Bitcoin spring to Bitcoin summer. Bitcoin summer has been 9 to 11 months. Bitcoin fall from the bubble top to the capitulation drop has been roughly 12 months, almost exactly the last two times. That leaves 18 months has been your average for the winter. The winter is not when things keep dropping, it's when everybody's given up. And it takes that long for people to regain hope. And that's the best time to buy. You had about 4 months that you could have bought in under 20,000 this last time. I mean, it dropped on November 10th to 15,400. By January 1st, it was still 16,100. And I
oh
knew it
yeah,
was safe to buy back in when Genesis Lending, went bankrupt and the price didn't drop because there were no sellers left. If you didn't sell
that's
after
that's pretty
uh,
crazy.
Terra Luna, you didn't sell after Celsius, you didn't sell after FTX, you weren't selling.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty crazy when you put it out this way. And actually, as we inevitably get closer and closer, towards the wrap of the session, even though with Michael, with you, brother, I think that if we sat down with a proper cup of coffee or or something else, I think that you and I could have like discussions that would be going all night long. So huge shout out as well to our mutual friend Simon Bogdanovich, who's an incredible
Mhm.
proponent to so many of incredible projects in the space, and man himself, man of the space himself. um Ultimately, one of the last questions is, because you're Michael, a big proponent, and I think a victim of many kind of like security breaches, right? In terms of like the SIM swaps, perhaps, that you might have experienced, that a lot of friends, a lot of people suffered out of within my circle. So would you be able to run us through a little bit on the security kind of like an aspects on how it's paving your way? How do you kind of like stay secure, knowing that this Bitcoin super cycle may actually be very fruitful? How do you stay secure, and how what were the pitfalls and the lessons learned over the years from you since
Well,
2013?
I already had quite good security when I got my big hack in 2018. But they need to have better regulation of the telcos. They're starting now. They did move toward a bill under the Biden administration that with the FCC talking about forcing the telcos to recognize and to protect consumers against SIM swapping, and that's actually what I just won on my case against AT&T in federal appeals court because the judge in Los Angeles had ruled that basically the telcos were not responsible. And our three-panel federal appeals court said, actually, that needs to go to trial. We think they are. And so now we're back going to trial in 2025, which, 7 years now and a lot of money to lawyers. But basically, the only vulnerability I had was if the telcos basically went and gave up my number. There are now things that you can do that weren't around back then to protect yourself. I'm not going to give a complete guide to what I'm doing right now to help somebody else unwind, but there's a couple of groups out there now. One, in fact, um, uh, that I'm invested in called Cloaked Wireless that basically has um, an MVNO where you are your own telco. So in other words, you have a T-Mobile phone number, but nobody can SIM swap it because you actually control your own. You're your own tech support. You're your own thing. So they can't call T-Mobile and say, "Hey, yeah, let me bribe somebody to do this." They'd have to bribe you to hack yourself, and that's not going to happen. So that's one of the key areas, um, and really the other ones are going to be to change the laws, which they're in the process of doing, and that's really kind of some of the big things.
I got you. And it seems that there is still so much more work to be done, actually, because, for many reasons, I still keep getting all those strange looking links, from the mobile operators, actual legit links that are transmitted in a way and conveyed and messaged in a way that it looked like a typical
Well, and
scam that you
phishing is a
see every
different
single
problem,
day
right?
in
Than
crypto.
Yeah, phishing is a different problem than SIM swapping. Phishing is out there big time. I mean, every couple of months there's something that is designed to trick you into letting someone into your system, right? And every time I get something that looks funny, I just Google to see if it's a well-known scam. And sure enough, I mean, for a while there, the clever ones were they'd send you an invoice and say this is payable right now, and you click on it. Of course, it's a virus, right? That goes in. And I think the latest one was something like the latest one is it says that your package is being held by customs and you need to click here to go and fill out a form, and I'm like going, I don't think customs sent you an email, and it didn't look like the email was like from customs, it was from a Gmail, and I was like, yeah, that's a scam. They're
Yeah,
clever.
pretty much. And on top of
Catch
that,
those people.
there are those new ways, Michael. Not sure you've experienced that though. Now they would call themselves, like, very often from those big media outlets in crypto, such as CoinDesk or Cointelegraph, and they say reportedly that they work with them, right? And but here's like, we will love. Hey, Michael, we love your work, right? We admire your work about the Supercycle book, and we want to invite you to an interview. And here's our calendar link. Can you use this link to schedule? And of course, that's so much severably, basically, of a similar outlooking link, basically, that you cannot tell the difference visually, right? So what I always do
Right.
is I always go and ask, like, can you message me from the main account? Then can you message me from the Coindesk account? Can you message
Yeah.
me from the Cointelegraph account? So of course there's no feedback, right? And it just interrupts. Although I was almost tweaked, twice, I think, to checking, because if they were they were literally like very organic looking conversations, right? There were real people sitting behind
Yeah.
that, so that they were not like robots, or they were no like typical, oh, here's your one giveaway and just click on this link to clean a $50,000 Bitcoin giveaway, right? Or whatever. So it's going at times uh very rough and very tempting for many people, I think, which is why they fall for those scams, which is why you have to stay extra vigilant basically and extra careful with anything you see on the internet. However, having the right people to follow, just like Michael Terpin, everybody, might be actually a little bit easier on scaling into the right direction, looking at the right direction. So I highly recommend actually that you go ahead and just check Michael's book, Bitcoin Supercycle, how the crypto calendar basically can make you rich, right? That's the paraphrase. And I truly admire your
Available
work,
on
Michael. And
Amazon. Thank you.
available on Amazon. Available on Amazon. I cannot recommend this book enough. And for everybody who's watching and listening, make sure you follow Michael Terpin on Twitter, on X, and it's exactly going to be what do you expect, Michael Terpin, at Michael Terpin. Crypto Godfather. I think there are not many people that are called Crypto Godfather in this industry. Michael is one of them, so he's the right person to follow. Go ahead, click the follow button on his account. Check out his book. And Michael, the final question to you: what's the final golden takeaway that you would give outside of your book as the golden line, the golden takeaway for everybody who's watching right now?
Well, I'd say that Bitcoin's the mothership. I think when retail gets involved, the last wave, they got involved mainly in Dogecoin. The second quarter of 2021, Robinhood reported that 60% of the crypto trading was in Doge. 60%. So that was more than Bitcoin and Ethereum combined. And I basically tell, sort of new people, the first thing you need to do is figure out how to get one Bitcoin. If you can buy it now, buy it. And if you can only buy a quarter of a Bitcoin, buy it and then just DCA in and read the cycles and wait until all of a sudden it's a quarter of the price now and then buy the rest. And because there's only 1 million people who have one Bitcoin or more, and that number's not going to change that much. And it only goes up a little bit during the bear markets. But when Bitcoin is 1 million, when it's 3 million, when it's 10 million, I mean, that's your retirement money right there. Everything else is a little bit risky. If you want to go and actually make a career out of it, you can go and do well by being a trader and follow people like Burb and subscribe to their sort of insider information things. And but that's a job, right? That's even if it's a part-time job. You can set it and forget it and just wake up twice a cycle to be able to you know sell high and then buy again low, and that is really the best kind of financial planning I think anybody can have, is to be able to like go and get into Bitcoin, which is now 100,000, knowing that it's going to be 1 million within 10 to, at worst case, 20 years. You can't say that about the stock market or gold.
Oh yeah, I appreciate all the kind words, and listen up, Michael. I really wish I had insider information, right? If someone holds insider information, you know where to find me, everybody, right?
Yeah.
Of course, acting up on it is another point that I think many people in the governments, in the Congress, and the politicians, politically exposed people that offer an overuse, which is another piece of a story to be discussed. Ladies and gentlemen, what an incredible session with the crypto godfather himself, Michael Terpin. Michael, thank you so much for your wealth of knowledge, generosity, your time, and patience with all the questions. It's been an excellent session, and I'm really looking forward to our next one that is hopefully going to be anytime soon, whenever we wish. So, yes.
Go to the next all-time high. The final one. I'll say when to sell. But thank you, Burb, and I'll look forward
Exactly.
to seeing you in Dubai once or twice next year.
Oh, we will. Thank you so much, Michael. For everybody who's watching and tuning, I appreciate your contribution. I appreciate your viewership right now. And this is a final reminder to actually rush yourself the VIP seat that is 50% off, because we are celebrating Black Friday. All you have to do to get access to all this reliable trading guidance by me and by my team 24/7 anytime you need it, to help you get back on the feet and help you basically learn how to stop missing on all those crazy rallies, especially when the crypto summer is about to happen. All you have to do is just scan the QR code and it's going to take you right in. It's time limited because the Black Friday doesn't happen every day. And I've been your host, Adrian Zdenchik, CMT, Charter Market Ignition, Crypto Verb. That's a wrap for today. Thank you so much. God bless you. See you around and bye-bye.